Introduction. Welcome, weary traveler, to another gentle journey through time with the sleepy historian. Tonight, you're invited to rest, unwind, and drift into a different age, one filled with flickering torchlight, muddy paths, and the slow rhythm of life long ago. This is boring history for sleep, a quiet place where the past is softly told. If you're someone who enjoys falling asleep to boring history, seeks bedtime relaxation and soft storytelling, or finds peace in a soft-spoken history documentary, you're in the right company. Our goal is simple: to soothe your mind, slow your thoughts, and gently guide you towards sleep. Using nothing more than calm narration, forgotten details, and a little dusty charm from history. Tonight's episode is titled, Why You Wouldn't Last a Day in Medieval Times. And before that sounds too dramatic, don't worry. We'll be looking at the hardships of the Middle Ages in the same sleepy, meandering way we always do. Imagine yourself walking through a damp, stone corridor, or sitting near a smoky fire in a peasant's cottage, or waking up at dawn to frozen water in a wooden bucket. The sights are dim, the sounds are muffled, and the world is very, very slow. Together, we'll explore what it truly meant to live through medieval hardship. From food that was often strange or scarce, to clothing that scratched and shoes that leaked, to tasks that filled each hour from dawn to dusk. We'll follow the daily rhythms of those who lived in this long-forgotten world. We'll meet the exhausted workers, hear the superstitions they whispered, and visit the stone halls of those who lived quite differently. The contrast may surprise you. If this kind of storytelling helps you rest, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it truly brings you peace. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's oddly comforting to know who else is out there, dozing off to the same quiet histories. You're not alone here. So, settle in, dim the lights, and let the distant bells toll. Let the winds of history blow softly across your pillow. Let the myths unfold, the fire crackle gently, and the medieval world draw you in, not to alarm you, but to lull you, one slow breath at a time. Let's begin. Imagine it is early morning in a small medieval village. The sun has not yet broken the horizon, and a soft, silvery mist hangs low over the earth. You're not in a castle or a noble's chamber. You're just one of many who live in a thatched cottage with walls of wattle and daub, the smell of damp straw in the air, and the sound of a rooster already crowing nearby. You awoken on a simple straw mattress that crackles with each movement, your only blanket a rough woolen sheet that hardly keeps out the night's chill. The room is dim. There are no glass windows, only a small wooden shutter you left slightly ajar, letting the cool scent of dew-covered earth and wood smoke. You stretch, slowly, carefully. The floor beneath you is uneven, packed dirt. There are no floorboards, no rugs, and no shoes waiting by your bed. If you're lucky, you'll find your leather-turned shoes beside the door, stiff in the cold and lined with dry grass for insulation. Your day begins without fanfare. No alarm clocks or morning routines, just necessity. Someone in the household, likely you or a sibling, must fetch water from a nearby well or stream. The bucket is heavy, the path muddy, and your breath fogs in front of your face as you go. Others in the village are up too, many of them children like you, with smudged faces, woolen caps pulled down tightly, and hands reddened by the cold. In the cottage, a small fire has been coaxed back to life using yesterday's embers. Fuel is scarce. You burn wood if you're lucky, more often dried dung or straw. A blackened kettle hangs over fire, and someone stirs a thin porridge made from barley or oats. It's bland, with no sugar, no cinnamon, perhaps a pinch of salt if any could be spared. It will keep you from feeling hollow through the long hours ahead. Life in a medieval village follows the seasons. This morning could be any time of year, but each brings its own challenges. In winter, the cold is bone-deep and unrelenting. In summer, the flies are thick and the labor is endless. Spring offers some joy, but only because it means food might soon grow again. Autumn means harvest, and backbreaking work from dawn until the stars appear. Children begin working young. You might be sent to the fields with the adults to pull weeds or carry tools. Or perhaps you tend to animals, chickens, pigs, maybe a skinny cow, cleaning their pens and gathering what could be used. You may also be tasked with watching over younger siblings. In the eyes of the medieval world, you are not too young for labor, only small enough to carry out the smaller tasks adults cannot be bothered with. School, for most children, does not exist. If you are incredibly fortunate, you might be taught a few prayers in Latin at the church. But more likely, your education will come in the form of repetition. Learning to tie bundles, mend baskets, carry loads, knead bread, sweep ashes. Every skill is learned by watching and repeating. There is no room for boredom, only survival. As the morning unfolds, sound begins to fill the air. A church bell tolls faintly from a distant monastery. Birds sing from the hedgerows. Hooves clatter on the dirt road as a traveling peddler creaks by with a cart full of iron nails, ribbons, and clay pots. Neighbors call to one another in passing, not with cheer, but with matter-of-factness. There's always work to be done. In these moments, the rhythm of medieval life reveals itself. Not hurried, not loud, but steady. You begin to see how each person's task fits into the greater whole. The blacksmith begins hammering in his forge. The baker, who woke even earlier, is already selling coarse loaves for a few coins or bartered eggs. Children and elders move in and out of cottages, every action purposeful. You realize that while medieval life is often romanticized, it was rarely romantic. The morning is beautiful, yes, but it is also hard, repetitive, and dictated entirely by the land, the seasons, and your place within them. By mid-morning, you're already tired. But there's no pause, no snack break, no warm bath to return to, just more to do, and little rest to expect. As the day moves past morning and into the hum of midday, the village finds itself deep in its rhythm. The sun has risen, though filtered through clouds and soot, and its faint warmth clings to the stone walls and weathered thatch of every cottage. By now, the air carries new smells: smoke, sweat, soil, and the sharp tang of fermenting ale. In a world without soap as we know it, where water for washing is a rare luxury and fabrics are coarse and never truly clean, the smells of daily life are thick and ever present. But here, no one notices. This is the air they live in. This is the texture of time. Imagine yourself inside one of those cottages. The ceiling is low, the beams warped, the floor a mix of dirt and straw. A chicken has wandered inside, pecking near the hearth as though she owns the place. Someone gently shoos her out with the end of a broom made from bound twigs. The fire is burning again, kept going all morning with handfuls of dried rushes and carefully saved fuel. It's time to think about the day's main meal. In the medieval world, most people eat once or twice a day, and when they do, it's not a grand affair. The idea of lunch is a luxury of future centuries. Instead, there's a breaking of the fast late in the morning, and another meal, lighter if possible, in the evening. But for now, in the heart of the day, hunger must be answered. The food is simple, often the same from one day to the next. Pottage is a staple, a thick, bubbling stew of whatever vegetables were available. Leeks, onions, cabbage, maybe a turnip or two. If beans or peas are in season, they're thrown in. Grains bulk it out: barley, oats, or sometimes rye. The pot hangs over fire constantly, reused and never truly emptied, each day's meal absorbing the leftovers of the day before. There is no menu. There is only what is on hand. Meat is rare for most villagers. When it appears, it is a prize, usually salted, smoked, or dried to stretch its life. Fresh meat, unless from a chicken, is uncommon and often a result of a dying animal rather than a planned slaughter. Bread accompanies most meals, but not the soft, white loaves we know today. Medieval bread for the poor is dark, dense, and coarse, often baked with chaff or even ground peas to stretch the flour. The better your bread, the higher your status. You sit on a rough bench or the floor, sharing from a communal wooden bowl or pot. You use your hands or a shared spoon. Conversation, if any, is about work still to be done. Perhaps someone mutters about the weather, a neighbor's injured cow, or news from a nearby town. A cart overturned, a monk passed through, someone's child is ill, but mostly you eat in silence, chewing steadily, the same taste over and over. After the meal, work continues. The afternoon brings new chores. For children, there may be wood to card, berries to gather, or errands to run. Older children might help repair fences or mend tools. Dung must be collected for fuel. The firewood pile must be restocked, carried by hand from the nearest wooded patch. And always, animals need attention. Fed, watered, their pens cleaned. For adults, the work never stops. Fields must be tended, weeds pulled, fences mended. Women spin thread, prepare herbs, care for children, knead dough, churn butter. If there's any cream to spare. If the family keeps bees, hives are checked. If flax is grown, it's soaked and beaten. Everything is seasonal. Everything requires labor, and every task, no matter how simple, takes time. By mid-afternoon, fatigue sets in. The sun, when visible, begins its slow dip. There are no clocks to tell you the hour. Time is felt, not measured. The shadows lengthen. The village quiets just slightly, and the birds begin to rustle in the hedgerows. You rub your aching shoulders, though you're barely 10 years old. Everyone aches. Everyone is tired, but there is still more to do. Now and then there's a break, brief and unspectacular. A jug of watered ale is passed around. Maybe someone carves a bit of wood or hums a tune remembered from church. An old woman tells a story to the youngest children, a tale of giants or saints or haunted wells. You listen, half believing, half asleep. In the distance, the bell tolls again. Evening is coming, and with it, the slow preparation for sleep, not rest, but survival. As the long medieval day begins its slow descent into evening, the village takes on a different rhythm. The tools are put away, the animals settled, and the air grows cooler. The heavy labor of the day has been carried out, and though bodies are sore, the tasks are never truly finished. Just pause until dawn. Imagine the fading light spilling into your small, smoky cottage. There are no lanterns, no bright lamps. Light comes from a hearth's flicker, from the last breath of a tallow candle, or perhaps from a rushlight, a simple reed soaked in fat, burning slowly with a soft, irregular glow. The shadows stretch along the walls like sleepy companions. The fire is banked again for night, ash pulled around it to keep its embers alive till morning. A few coals glow red at the center, the hearth humming faintly, a constant in a world of changing seasons. Meals in the evening are modest, often leftovers from the pottage pot, or a crust of bread, softened with warm milk or watered ale. You eat quickly without ceremony. The day's dust is still on your skin, your fingernails lined with soil. There is no bath waiting, no warm shower. If you are lucky, someone has warmed water in a kettle, and you might dab your face and hands with a damp cloth. But full bathing is rare, once a week, perhaps less. Cleanliness is relative. Before bed, there may be a few quiet rituals. A prayer muttered aloud in Latin or the vernacular, depending on what you've been taught. A parent may whisper blessings over their children. A simple wooden cross might be kissed, a candle snuffed with a breath. Sometimes a song is sung, soft, slow, barely above a hum. Something old, passed down through generations, its meaning more felt than understood. You lie down on a mattress made of straw, or hay stuffed into a sack, if you're fortunate. Others sleep on benches, or directly on the floor. The wealthy may have feather beds and bolsters, but most villagers do not. The smell of the day clings to everything: sweat, ash, smoke, wool, and earth. Sleep is not an escape. It is a necessity, another form of labor, as essential and unpaid as any chore. Bedtimes are early, without electric light or digital distraction. Darkness comes quickly and completely. The night outside is alive, rustling leaves, hooting owls, the distant bark of dogs. Insects buzz, and the wind sometimes knocks against the wooden shutters. In some cottages, animals sleep inside, chickens in baskets, pigs near the hearth. The warmth they offer is worth the disruption. In the loft above or beside you, other bodies breathe slowly. Parents, siblings, perhaps a visiting cousin or elder. Privacy is a concept for nobles. For villagers, closeness is survival. You learn to fall asleep surrounded by others, sharing warmth, sharing dreams, sharing space. Whispered conversations trail off into silence. The rhythm of their breathing becomes your lullaby. Some nights, someone tells a story, not always a happy one. Medieval bedtime tales are filled with warnings of ghosts, of witches, of the wild hunt. The boundary between the seen and unseen world is thin at night, and the dark holds many secrets. But oddly, these tales don't frighten. They comfort. They explain the world, even its terrors. And they give shape to fear in ways that make it easier to live with. Eventually, sleep arrives. Not the soft, curated rest we know today, but something heavier, sometimes interrupted. People in the Middle Ages often woke for a time in the middle of the night, a period historians call first sleep and second sleep. In those quiet hours, they might pray, stoke the fire, or simply lie awake listening to the house settle. Then gradually they drift back off, and when they did sleep, it was deep, earned, a rest from toil, not indulgence. In that sleep, beneath beams blackened with soot and stars hidden behind thatch, the medieval villager found brief peace, until the rooster crowed and it all began again. Let us now shift our gaze from the smoky cottages of common folk to the grand, echoing chambers of medieval castles, and into the life of a royal child. Not just any child, but one born under the weighty title of prince. Imagine now, not a simple mattress of straw, but a great canopied bed carved from oak, draped with thick fabrics. The room is still cold, colder even than the humble cottage, as stone retains a chill, but the status, the ritual, the isolation is world apart. The life of a medieval prince is not as charmed as we might imagine. It is scripted, public, and often lonely. From birth, a royal child was not just a child. It was a future symbol, a vessel for lineage, diplomacy, and dynastic ambition. His cries echoed not just through the nursery, but through the halls of politics and power. A son meant strength, continuity, and with that came enormous expectation. Imagine yourself at 5 or 6 years old, already dressed in heavy brocade, standing stiffly beside your tutors. You are learning Latin phrases, the names of saints, the Our War, not through play, but through repetition and discipline. You are expected to sit still through long sermons, to watch, to listen. Your toys are miniatures of the adult world. Carved horses, small swords, and perhaps a wooden castle. Even your leisure is shaped to mold you. Nurses and tutors surround you more than parents. The queen, often busy with matters of court, may visit daily or less. The king, distant, a figure of awe and approval, rarely affection. You grow up among adults and courtiers who bow to you, but do not embrace you. Formality blankets every interaction. When you speak, it is rehearsed. When you laugh, it is noted. And yet, there are moments of childishness. In private, When the doors are closed and the tapestries muffle the world, a prince might run barefoot across a stone, shout, or sneak sugared almonds from a silver dish. But even these acts are observed. Servants see all. Walls whisper. Meals are grand, but rarely tailored to the taste of a child. Long hours at the table, etiquette enforced like armor. Forks, still uncommon, are replaced by fingers and knives. You are expected to drink watered wine. Your napkin is linen, your seat elevated, and the entire hall watches how you chew. Imagine the weight of eyes, even when simply biting into bread. Education continues into every hour. You are taught to read, to pray, to ride, to hunt. A falcon perches on your glove hand, and you are told that control is everything. Emotion is weakness. Strength lies in stillness. When you fall, you are expected to rise without complaint. Pain is a lesson. Cold, a teacher. Your bedchamber may be richly decorated, but at night it is still dim, quiet, and drafty. A single candle burns low. The fire smolders. You sleep under furs, alone, with perhaps only a young servant nearby to tend to the hearth. You are reminded to pray before sleeping. For your soul, your future reign, and the safety of your house. In dreams, you may return to simpler places. You might imagine the woods beyond the castle walls, or the village you once passed through in a gilded carriage. You wonder what it's like to chase frogs in the mud or nap beneath a tree. But these are dreams only, and upon waking, the velvet robe waits. The lessons resume, and the crown, though still distant, casts its long shadow. This is the life of a medieval prince. Honored, yes, but also curated, confined, and burdened from the moment of first breath. Childhood, in this gilded world, is a performance. Let us now pass through another castle corridor, softer perhaps, but no less weighted with expectation, and into the quiet, cloistered world of a medieval princess. She is born into silk and uncertainty. From her first breath, her life is shaped not by what she will do, but by what she will be, a bride, a symbol, a promise. Her name might be stitched into treaties before she can write it herself. Imagine yourself in her chambers. The air is scented with herbs, lavender, mint, rosemary, not luxury, but necessity to mask the chamber pot's odor and the castle's damp chill. Tapestries line the walls, keep the cold at bay, each stitch telling stories older than her name. As a child, the princess's life is structured around grace, obedience, and learning the tools of quiet influence. Her morning begins not with play, but with instruction. A governess teaches her manners, embroidery, and French, the language of diplomacy. She learns to read, often from psalters and books of hours, hands clasped delicately, spine straight. Her voice is trained to be soft but clear. Laughter, if allowed, must be gentle. Even at 6 or 7 years old, her clothing is a layered ordeal. Linen smock, chemise, lace bodice, overgown. Nothing is ever quite comfortable. Beauty is control, and even in childhood, posture is praised above play. She may have a small lapdog, a gift from a visiting noble, and a car doll made of cloth and straw. These are her companions. Other girls may be present. Noble-born companions sent to foster under the same roof. But even friendships are political. Trust is measured. Meals are quiet. While her brothers learn tactics and swordplay, she practices conversation. She must not fidget. Her hands are trained for spinning and weaving, not for soil or sword. She is praised for her modesty, for her silence. Too much curiosity is discouraged. But there are moments, precious private ones, where she slips past the weight of her name, perhaps in a garden, trailing a finger through a fountain's edge, or alone with a book, eyes drifting over illuminated letters. These are small freedoms, savored carefully. As she grows older, her lessons expand. She is taught to manage a household, how to oversee servants, record expenses, tend to the sick, and dispense alms. Her mother or a trusted aunt might teach her herbs for healing, or how to navigate a court full of whispers and glances. These are skills not of power, but of influence, soft, unseen, and expected. But always, her future lies elsewhere. At 12, maybe 14, a letter arrives. A marriage alliance. Her name has been offered in exchange for land, peace, or favor. She may be sent to a new court, across mountains or seas, to meet a man she's never seen and carry his heirs. She packs a chest with carefully embroidered linens, dowry and duty stitched into every thread. Her identity bends to new customs, new expectations. She becomes a queen or a duchess, but never her own person. Her childhood ends not in rebellion, but in silence, as she steps into a role shaped by centuries. And yet, in that silence, there's quiet strength. Generations of women learn to move the world through softness, through patience, through quiet wisdom. It is a life of constraint, yes, but also complexity, of unseen power, and of endurance. As we continue through the layered corridors of royal life, we move beyond a child and a bride, and now into the presence of a queen, not a mythical figure of majesty and command, but a woman living beneath a crown made of ceremony, responsibility, and quiet vigilance. Imagine her seated beside the king during a feast. Her smile is practiced, her gaze observant. She speaks little, yet every word matters. The room may be filled with lords and knights, jesters and stewards, but her awareness is wider. She sees who is seated too close to power, whose goblet is left too empty, whose laughter carries with false cheer. Queens in medieval courts were not mere figureheads, nor were they merely consorts. They were stewards of lineage, curators of peace, arbiters of alliances. Their duties extended far beyond bearing heirs, though this, too, was considered their sacred task. In her chambers, the queen might oversee petitions from villagers, review the operations of her dower lands, or plan almsgiving to the poor. She may be a patron of an abbey or school, ensuring prayers are said for her family's souls. When illness strikes a kingdom, as it often did, she may prepare remedies with her ladies, blending rosemary, sage, and vinegar. The same hands that cradle a child may also crush herbs for salves or tie strips of linen for bandages. She prays beside the sick, comforts the dying, and still, the realm expects her to smile at feast. Many queens became political players in their own right. Eleanor of Aquitaine ruled vast lands and participated in crusades. Isabella of France helped oppose her husband, Edward II. Catherine de' Medici shaped the course of French history. Yet even less notorious queens held influence. Through whispers, through alliances forged at birthbeds and baptismal fonts. Behind her quiet demeanor lay a maze of strategy. A misstep could cost her family dearly. A wrong word in court might be remembered for decades. A misaligned marriage between her children and foreign royals could invite war. Her wardrobe, too, was political, not simply beautiful. The fabric she wore, velvet from Italy, furs from the Baltic, pearls from the Orient, were carefully chosen to signal wealth, alliances, or mourning. A sleeve cut just so could echo the fashion of another court, a subtle nod of diplomacy. And yet, amid all this calculation, she might find moments of stillness. In the chapel, fingers wrapped around a rosary. In the garden, watching sparrows flit between hedges. In those moments, she is simply a woman, weary perhaps, but resilient. As the sun sets behind the castle walls, her role never ends. The queen is not allowed to rest entirely. Not in a world where her silence must echo with wisdom, and her grace must carry the weight of nations' expectations. As we pass from the chambers of queens and princes into quieter corners of the medieval world, let us gently open a door seldom noticed but ever present. The world of superstition and the subtle culture of sleep. In the still hours after sunset, A different rhythm took hold in the Middle Ages, one of shadows and silence. With no electric glow, the nights were long, thick, and profoundly dark. For much of the medieval population, sleep was not just a natural need. It was a vulnerable act. And so, a host of quiet beliefs grew up around it, like ivy wrapping a stone wall. Imagine yourself in a peasant cottage. The thatched roof creaks with the whisper of wind. Inside, a fire glows low on the hearth, casting flickering shapes on the walls. The bed is little more than a wooden frame, stuffed with straw and covered with coarse wool blankets. You can hear the soft breathing of others. Sleep was often communal, for warmth and safety. A family might all share the same sleeping space, or a servant might sleep at the foot of a master's bed. But before the fire dies and eyelids close, there are rituals, small, almost unconscious gestures meant to protect the soul as it slips into slumber. Herbs like lavender, mugwort, or chamomile might be placed under pillows to ward off bad dreams. A charm, a tiny cross carved from bone or etched into wood, might be hung above the bed. Children were often told to sleep with iron scissors beneath their pillows, kept slightly open to drive away evil spirits. Why? Because sleep was seen as a moment where the soul might wander. Dreams were not trifles. They were viewed as windows to the divine or the demonic. People believed dreams might foretell sickness, danger, or a message from the heavens. Waking suddenly in the middle of the night, a person might whisper a prayer, afraid that something unseen had visited them in the dark. It wasn't just dreams that inspired caution. The physical act of sleep had risks. Nightmares weren't just bad dreams. They were literal visitations. The word nightmare comes from the belief in the Mara, a spirit or witch-like creature that would sit on a sleeper's chest, suffocating them. Some people describe waking in a panic, unable to move. Today we call this sleep paralysis, but in medieval times, it was the work of a spirit to guard against such nighttime visitors. Salt was sometimes sprinkled at the doorway or across the hearth. Cats were considered both protectors and harbingers, depending on local lore. Their presence in a room was sometimes encouraged, sometimes feared. Sleep, in this context, was split. People in the Middle Ages often practiced segmented sleep. 2 phases, broken by a period of wakefulness around midnight. In that in-between time, some prayed, others read from devotional books by candlelight, some simply reflected on the day. There was a quiet understanding that night was not a single block of rest, but a cycle of descent and return. In monasteries, bells would toll for matins or lauds, calling monks from sleep to prayer in the pitch-dark hours. In rural cottages, farmers might stoke the fire and quietly check on animals before returning to bed. Night was not empty, it was quietly alive. All of these small behaviors, lighting a beeswax candle, whispering a prayer to St. Michael, tucking rosemary into a bed frame, build a soft shield between waking life and the mystery of the unconscious. And though these beliefs varied from village to village, from castle to cottage, one thing remained constant. Sleep was not just about rest. It was about surrendering to dreams, to spirits, to darkness, and hoping to safely wake again. Now, imagine the fires burned low. The last embers crackle softly beneath the iron pot. In the hush before sleep, someone begins to speak. Slowly, quietly, spinning a tale meant to pass the time before dreams arrive. This was the world of medieval ghost stories and bedtime legends. These stories were not told for thrills, at least not in the way we tell ghost stories today. Instead, they served as gentle warnings, moral guides, and occasionally a shared release, a way for communities to explain the unexplainable, to pass down values, or make sense of the eerie sounds in the night. Let's begin with the familiar, the restless dead. In medieval lore, those who died with unfinished business or outside the grace of the church were often said to return. These spirits, called revenants, might rise from their graves to knock on doors, disturb animals, or appear silently beside a stream. Picture a mother telling her children, in a tone both hushed and firm, about the soul of the miller who didn't confess his sins. He now wanders the forest by night. They'd say, dragging the heavy chain he forged in life with every unfair coin taken from villagers. It wasn't meant to terrify, but to remind honesty mattered. Confession mattered. Even death was not freedom from responsibility. But not all nighttime stories were grim. Many were simply strange, peculiar tales of magical folk and quiet miracles. There were stories of green children found in fields who spoke no known language, or of saints who protected travelers from wolves by whispering prayers that made the beasts lie down like sheep. In some villages, tales were told of will-o'-the-wisps, strange lights that danced across the marshes. These glowing orbs were said to be mischievous spirits or lost souls, luring wanderers away from safe paths. Elders would warn the young not to follow strange lights at night, for they may never return. Children listened to stories of fairies who traded changelings for sleeping infants, and of woods that whispered secrets if you were quiet enough. Sometimes, a tale would follow a clever maiden who tricked a goblin, or a pious shepherd who was rewarded with a dream of heaven. These legends weren't always recorded, but passed mouth to mouth, from hearth to hearth. In castles, stories carried different flavors. A court lady might speak of a ghostly knight who roamed the battlements, mourning a lost battle. A page boy might whisper about the haunted chamber on the third floor, where a candle would relight itself each night. A sign, it was said, that a nobleman had been murdered there. Even monasteries, those strongholds of faith and learning, had their share of eerie legends. Monks spoke of books that turned pages on their own, or of strange footprints appearing in cloisters after snowfall. Some believed these were signs of angels or demons. Despite the murmur of fear, there was also comfort in these stories. They connected listeners to something larger, to ancestors, to morality, to mystery. They offered a way to drift into sleep feeling tethered to a world rich with unseen threads. And sometimes these stories softened into parables. A tale about a night tricked by a ghost might end with, "And so he learned to speak with kindness," allowing young listeners to close their eyes with a sense of resolution. For a medieval child, the world was not divided neatly between the real and the imagined. Both coexisted, especially at night. A ghost story was as real as the chill in the room or the creak of the rafters. And when the final word was spoken, perhaps with a slow smile, the storyteller would say, "Now sleep and dream no dreams," as though to seal the spell. As our journey through mysterious corners of medieval sleep continues, we move from spoken tales to the silent echoes left behind. The objects, the written records, the strange artifacts and lingering beliefs that whisper the unseen. In monasteries, the night was sacred. Dreams were often recorded, pondered, and preserved like rare books. Monks believed that some dreams were divine messages, glimpses into the will of God, or visions of saints who came not in daylight, but in darkness. And so, in scriptoria across Europe, scribes inked careful notes in the margins of illuminated manuscripts. A monk dreamed of a black dog by the altar. Another saw St. Cuthbert pointing to a fallen tree. These accounts weren't dismissed. They were documented, sometimes even debated in council. Now, imagine yourself in a cold stone monastery in northern England. It is the 12th century. The wind howls outside, but inside, a candle burns steady beside a monk's desk. His quill scratches quietly as he writes. On the third night after Michaelmas, I dream of a field of ash, and from it rose the Blessed Virgin, and with that, another fragment of the dream world is saved, not for entertainment, but as sacred evidence. Beyond religious settings, dreams occupied a strange space in medieval life. Physicians studied them. In the tradition of Galenic medicine, dreams were thought to reflect the balance or imbalance of the humors in the body. A person who dreamed of fire might have an excess of yellow bile. A dream of water, too much phlegm. This was serious business. Some noble households even kept dream books, collections of symbols and their meanings, to be consulted in the morning like an oracle. But it wasn't all theory. People also surrounded themselves with objects believed to protect or influence their sleep. Under floorboards of old cottages, archaeologists have found witch bottles, small vessels filled with hair, nails, herbs, and even pins. These weren't potions, but protective traps, designed to confuse and capture malevolent spirits that might sneak into a home at night. Other findings include amulets carved with words in Latin or runes, placed near pillows. In Germany and parts of Scandinavia, sleeping charms were stitched into children's clothing. A cross here, a crescent moon there. Some relics were more tactile. A worn wooden bead said to have touched a saint's shrine, kept beneath a mattress to ward off bad dreams. And then there were the dream-inducing relics. Pilgrims visited churches not only for healing, but for dreams. In certain shrines, it was believed that if one slept overnight on the stone floor, they might receive a vision, guidance for a decision, a glimpse of the afterlife, or forgiveness. This practice was called incubation. And while it dates back to ancient times, medieval Christians continue the tradition quietly, reverently. In castle ruins today, researchers have discovered carved faces near bedroom doors, not for decoration, but for protection, called apotropaic symbols. They were meant to scare away evil spirits or watch the sleeper in a protective way. These faces, sometimes comical or distorted, were like silent guardians. Dreams, then, were never just dreams. They were events, experiences, moments that linger in the mind and in the fabric of daily life. Whether viewed through the lens of medicine, magic, or faith, they were treated with a mix of awe and caution. And what of nightmares? For these, there were cures. One might hang a sprig of rowan over the bed. Another might say a charm aloud 3 times before sleeping. Some would fast before bed, believing that heavy meals stirred bad visions. The church offered prayers for safe rest. Some monks even composed special psalms to be whispered at midnight. Even graveyards speak to this. In some rare cases, bodies were buried with stones on their chests or mouths, believed to prevent the dead from rising in sleep-like states to torment the living. Such burials were not common, but when found, they suggest that even death itself was seen through the lens of rest, disturbance, and renewal. The medieval world did not separate night and day as we do now. It moved in cycles, light into dark, waking into sleep, stories into dreams, and sometimes dreams into action. For the people of that time, sleep was not an end. It was a passage, full of signs. And so they left behind small clues, fragment of cloth, scribbled prayers, carved stones, and soot-darkened ceilings above where they once lay. Their dreams are lost to time, but their belief in them remains etched in wood, bone, and memory. Imagine yourself once more in the Middle Ages, but this time not in a thatched cottage or monastery cell. Instead, you find yourself in the winding stone corridors of a great castle. Tapestries hang heavy on the walls to block the draft. The ceilings stretch high above, and behind a carved wooden door lies the chamber of a noble. This is where we explore how the upper classes, nobles, lords, ladies, and royalty, prepared for sleep. Unlike their poorer counterparts, medieval elites had access to space, servants, materials, and rituals that shaped their nightly routines in markedly different ways. But even with all their wealth and status, sleep still bore the same mystery and vulnerability. First came the preparation of a room. Noble sleeping chambers were often large and chilly, with thick walls that held both security and damp. Before retiring, servants would bring warm stones wrapped in cloth to place beneath the covers or at the feet of the bed. These stones, sometimes baked in the hearth, offered brief comfort against the biting cold. Candles were lit in wall sconces or in tall iron holders, providing a flickering glow across the tapestries and furs. It was common for noble households to burn scented herbs such as lavender or chamomile to sweeten the air. A perfumed room, it was believed, helped calm the humors and ward off illness, which they believed could enter through bad smells. Before undressing, noblemen and women would wash their hands and face with warmed water brought in by attendants. This wasn't just about cleanliness. It was also symbolic, a soft cleansing of the day. In some households, a small prayer was recited during this moment, accompanied by the sign of the cross. Clothing for sleep depended on status and climate. Wealthy women might wear long night dresses made of linen or fine wool, while noblemen might wear loose shirts. In colder regions or seasons, furs were sometimes worn to bed. Occasionally, the head was covered, not for fashion, but to keep warm. Beds themselves were elaborate. Unlike the simple straw mattresses of common folk, elite beds were elevated platforms, often carved of oak or walnut. The mattress was stuffed with wool, feathers, or even down. The bed would be layered with sheets, blankets, fur throws, and embroidered covers. And above it all, a canopy, not just for luxury, but to help retain warmth and privacy. In the wealthiest circles, beds were sometimes placed within bedchambers and side chambers, rooms within rooms, so that sleep could occur away from noise, visitors, and political whisperings. Bed curtains were common and could be drawn at night to hold in heat and keep out light and insects. Some curtains were so thick that the bed felt like its own little private chamber, especially in the depth of winter, when every draft mattered. But sleep wasn't immediate. Just like commoners, nobles would often spend time talking with family or attendants before bed. Some would read from illuminated books or hear stories read aloud. Saints' lives, romances, or even translations of Roman philosophers like Seneca or Cicero. Prayers were almost always said before bed, and for the devout, this was a time of quiet reflection. Candles might be snuffed one by one as a symbolic shedding of the world's worries. In royal households, bedtimes could be more elaborate. Kings and queens sometimes had public bedtimes, where favored courtiers were allowed to attend the monarch as they were helped into bed. This ceremony was less about sleep and more about politics, a signal of favor and status. Interestingly, many nobles did not sleep alone. Aside from spouses, it was not uncommon for a trusted servant child or even a favorite animal to sleep nearby. Dogs were especially favored for their warmth, loyalty, and symbolism. Despite all the layers and attendants and tapestries, night still brought silence. The torches dimmed, the castle grew still, and even the noblest blood, wrapped in brocade and down, slipped in the same strange realm of dreams as every shepherd and scullery maid. Sleep was the great equalizer. It made no exception for rank, and in the still hours before dawn a lord or lady might wake, just as any of us might, to the rustle of wind, the ache of memory, or the weight of quiet thoughts. Sleep, for the medieval elite, was not just a physical necessity. It was a deeply symbolic and often unsettling affair. As the stars turned above cold stone towers and the hush of night settled over the sleeping castles and keeps, nobles found themselves entering a world they could not control. Unlike feasting or tournaments, which were planned and performed, sleep came unbidden. And in that surrender, there was a quiet vulnerability that even royal blood could not avoid. To understand how noble families viewed the act of sleep is to step into a mindset very different from our own. In the Middle Ages, dreams were not merely curious happenings. They were believed to be messages, divine, demonic, or prophetic. A monarch waking from a strange vision might call for a priest, a doctor, or even a dream interpreter to help make sense of what the night had revealed. For example, a king who dreamed of blood running through the halls of his keep might fear assassination or political betrayal. A queen who saw herself flying might interpret the dream as a sign of triumph or a warning from heaven. Entire decisions, including military campaigns or succession plans, were sometimes influenced by dreams. This belief in the power of dreams meant that going to bed wasn't always peaceful. It could be laced with anxiety. Was the soul prepared? Would sleep bring clarity or chaos? To guard against sinister dreams, nobles employed various rituals and charms. One might place a silver cross beneath the pillow or burn rosemary and sage in the room. Certain psalms were believed to protect the sleeper from spiritual invasion. Others carried relics, such as fragments of saint's bone, hidden in their bedclothes. Noble women, especially those expecting children, were particularly superstitious about night terrors. Dreams of cats, bats, or serpents were considered ominous, sometimes believed to foreshadow sickness or miscarriage. There were also beliefs about night demons, such as the incubus or the mare. These spectral beings were said to visit sleepers in the night, pressing on their chests, stealing breath, or planting sinful thoughts. If a noble woke breathless or distressed, it was often attributed to these entities, rather than indigestion or troubled emotions. The elite were also afraid of premonitions in sleep. Historical records speak of nobles who claimed to foresee their own deaths or those of their children through dreams. These dreams were passed along in hushed tones, written in journals or whispered into confession. Some nobles went so far as to change their wills, cancel journeys, or build chapels based on the eerie pull of a midnight vision. And yet, amid the fear and mysticism, sleep still held moments of comfort. There were dreams of reunion, of long-dead parents appearing with gentle words. There were dreams of angels, of gardens, of victory in battle, or peace across kingdoms. These were the dreams nobles longed for, the ones interpreted as blessings or divine approval. To encourage such dreams, certain foods and herbs were consumed before bed. Warm milk, infused with honey and poppy seed, was believed to soften the mind and invite kinder dreams. Lavender stuffed into pillows was said to repel demons and attract celestial visions. Some noble families even kept dream journals, passed down across generations. These records were not only private reflections, but also tools for understanding fate and family legacy. A disturbing dream could be the subject of an entire morning's council. A hopeful dream might inspire a donation to the church. Interestingly, not all dreams were interpreted literally. In more educated circles, especially in Italy and France, the influence of ancient Roman thinkers like Cicero and Macrobius encouraged symbolic readings of dreams. A serpent might not mean danger, but cunning. A flooded chamber might not mean drowning, but overwhelming duties. Still, the medieval mind always held space for the divine. If God wanted to speak, he might do so in dreams. If Satan sought to confuse, he too would speak from the shadows of sleep. For the elite, sleep was both a private retreat and a spiritual battlefield. And each night, wrapped in furs and velvet, with firelight flickering on carved ceiling beams, nobles closed their eyes not knowing whether dreams would bring peace or peril. The night was long and the mind unguarded. As with all things in the medieval world, even sleep could become a battleground, particularly when it refused to come at all. For the elite, insomnia was more than a nuisance. It was a perplexing ailment, seen by many not as a mere health issue, but as a sign of imbalance, divine unrest, or troubled conscience. And unlike the peasantry, who simply worked until exhaustion overtook them, nobles often had the luxury and burden of time to notice when sleep failed to arrive. Noble insomniacs turned to a range of curious, sometimes elaborate remedies. The wealthy had access to apothecaries who could prepare syrups, potions, and tinctures from exotic ingredients. Poppy seed oil, mandrake root, valerian, rose water, and even ground pearls. Some of these concoctions were sedative. Others were symbolic, meant to realign the humors. The four fluids medieval medicine believed governed the body. Still others sought help from the church. Sleeplessness, especially persistent bouts, might be interpreted as a spiritual affliction. A soul that could not rest was often thought to be burdened by unconfessed sin, divine punishment, or the whisperings of temptation. Priests might offer nighttime blessings or recommend prayers specifically for rest. Most famously, Psalm 4 verse 8. In peace I will lie down and sleep, for you alone, Lord, make me dwell in safety. Some nobles commissioned special charms or amulets to place under their pillows. Small bags of herbs, holy medallions, or scraps of parchment inscribed with protective prayers. Others requested sacred relics be brought into their rooms, bone fragment of saints, crucifixes, or even a vial of holy sleep water from a monastery. But if remedies failed, there was still the long night to endure. For nobles who remained awake, certain midnight routines emerged. A lord or lady might summon a servant to rekindle the fire, or bring warmed wine spiced with cloves and cinnamon. Sometimes they requested a favorite book to be read aloud. Other times, they simply walked softly, slowly, through the shadowed halls of their manor or castle. These nighttime walks were strangely common in elite circles. Wrapped in cloaks or fur-lined robes, nobles would pace their galleries, study the moonlight falling through stained glass, or stand silently before devotional altars flickering with beeswax candles. They spoke to no one and expected no answers. It was not uncommon for an insomniac noble to write letters in the night, quiet musings to friends or political notes that would be sent at dawn. There are records of queens who embroidered quietly through the midnight hours, each stitch a form of meditation. There are stories of dukes who played soft melodies on lutes to settle the spirit. And there were even kings who called for their astrologers in the dark, hoping the stars might explain their unrest. Perhaps most surprisingly, the medieval elite understood the idea of segmented sleep. It was not unusual for nobles to wake after a few hours of rest, engage in some gentle activity, prayer, reading, reflection, and then return to bed. This first sleep and second sleep pattern was widely accepted and even recommended by physicians at the time. And so, the sleepless noble wandered between fire and parchment, prayer and silence. Even with their silken sheets, chamberlains, and physicians, there was no guarantee of slumber. The human mind, whether burdened by guilt, fear, ambition, or imagination, remained elusive. And when the first light of dawn seeped through high windows, and the castle stirred with the movements of servants and bells, the noble might feel relief. The long night was over. Sleep or no sleep, the world returned. The rooster crowed, the fire was stoked, and another day began. The bed was remade, the pillows fluffed in sleep. The strange and silent sovereign of the night once again stepped back into shadow. And so, dear listener, the flickering candle of our journey draws to its final glimmer. We wander through castle kitchens and noble chambers, through silent feasts and sleepless nights, exploring how the past, so distant and strange, was, in its quiet ways, not so different from the world we know. We've uncovered how medieval nobles dreamt, how they worried, how they tried to rest, and how even the most powerful among them sometimes stared into the darkness, waiting for sleep that never came. Here at the Sleepy Historian, we share these gentle stories not to startle, not to shock, but to soothe. To remind you that long before modern cities and streaming screens, people lived slow lives filled with rituals, restlessness, wonder, and warmth. If the soft-spoken history has helped you rest, even just a little, I invite you to gently tap the like button, only if it brought you peace, of course. If you'd like more stories like this drifting through your nights, consider subscribing. And if you feel comfortable, share in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's strangely comforting to know who else is out there, floating gently to sleep to the same old stories. As we close the book on tonight's tale, imagine yourself lying in a quiet stone room, wrapped in wool and velvet. The fire has faded to coals. The stars hang steady above. Somewhere in the keep, A servant yawns. A bell tolls softly from a distant chapel. All is still, and while the nobles of old may have feared their dreams, you can let your thoughts drift gently, calmly, freely. Let the rhythm of the past carry you forward into sleep. Thank you for spending your evening with the Sleepy Historian, where boring history becomes a lullaby. Until next time, may your mind rest, your thoughts wander, and your sleep be deep and peaceful. Good night.